Welcome to the Podcast Editors Mastermind with the good, the bad, and the Yetis. I'm Carrie Caulfield-Eric, and I'm here with
Brian Ensminger,
Daniel Abendroth,
and Jennifer Longworth.
So do you want to just maybe tell everybody where we are and what we're doing, and we'll get started?
No, to be fair, this is all Brian's idea, so I feel like
right.
Okay, Brian, where are we and what are we doing?
Yeah, so we're sitting at PodFest. 3 of us are sitting on the floor, and 1 of us is sitting on a bench. We're all hiding out from the rest of the people to record this, and we don't really know what we're going to talk about yet, do we? Or do we? Yeah, actually, you had some ideas. Yeah,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So we participated in the Podcast Editors Conference, the first ever Podcast Editors Conference yesterday. And the final session was about disfluencies and ethics. And it raised a question in my mind about curse words. And when do you take out expletives and when do you not if your show is not marked explicit? Is there a line to or not to cross when editing expletives?
So, sorry. Should we also let them know that my wife is also here?
Yeah, hey,
Michelle Abendroth, our producer.
Yes, so quick, just note for you guys as you're recording, because your audience doesn't know who you are, but you know who you are, just say, hey, this is Jennifer when you hop in, and your audience can get to know your voice and can get to know you.
Good call. Hi, this is Jennifer.
So this is Daniel. And for me, I'd have to say that anything that is said in the episode, I have permission to leave in, unless it's something that I have explicitly discussed with the client. So stumbles, ahs, that I have permission to take out. But when it comes to swearing, if they haven't told me they want it taken out, I'll leave that in because they know what happened. And if they don't say anything, then I'm assuming they want it in there. Now, if it comes to a question since marking it explicit, even an episode is going to get the show banned in certain countries, I would just bring that up to the client, be like, hey, this was said. Here are the consequences of that. Do you want me to leave it in or do you want me to bleep it, silence it? What do you want me to do?
I cut it if I can. This is Carrie. I cut it if I can, especially if I know the client's show and they don't normally have swear words in their show. So I'll just try to cut it out. If not, I'll maybe bleep it or quiet that part or, chop some of it up. But if I really wasn't sure, I would just ask, because that's, what does a client want? Do they want cussing? They don't always want cussing. They don't always expect their guests to cuss. And then after they've handed you off the file, they've gone and forgotten about the cussing that's there. And I don't want them to be surprised.
I don't think some of my clients realize that if they cuss in certain words that their show needs to be explicit and that one show makes all shows explicit. I probably need to have this conversation because one of the shows, the most recent that this came up on, was very young show. She's only 5 episodes in and the person says, well, can I cuss? And they say, sure. And I'm like, no, this is not a cussing type show. This is a civic engagement discussion about how to make the world better show. Not like the show I'll be doing soon. I know it's going to be all full of all crazy stuff because they've already warned me. So all of everything's going to stay in. But for these other shows, the guest usually asks, can I cuss? And
the host almost always says yes, regardless of whether or not their show has cussing or not.
Yeah.
They're being nice to the guests and making them feel comfortable. I always try to cut that part out and then let the guest, when the guest makes their point, then that's where I start.
If I can take it out, it's well, bleep, bleep, bleep. Sometimes it's just sentence enhancers. I think they call it in SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah. And sometimes I will put a little sound effect underneath, just it's a fun way to bleep it out so that sentiment is there, but it's not the actual word.
Yeah.
And sometimes the hosts like it, and there's some hosts that just don't listen to their shows, so they don't even know. They don't listen to their shows after we edit it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, so this actually came up for me recently on a fairly young show. It's about, 12 or 13 episodes in, and it's typically a monologue. It's all business-based stuff, and it's actually a show that I white label for. So my client is actually a production company, and their customer is this particular host. And so I reached out to them and said, hey, this is in there. I noticed that the show is marked clean. How would you like me to handle it? And then what I did is I went through and I did all the editing as though we were going to add beeps to it. And I said, okay, here's the final produced file. I don't do anything post audio editing. I don't do any of the uploads. I don't do any meta tagging. So then I said, here's the final produced audio. We did it like we discussed, where I beeped it out. If they would like it done differently, I need to know. But based on the way that the language was used in this particular episode, I'm not going to be able to cut it cleanly because it was always merged in with other stuff. So if you think of like your typical and so, if you can cut an and so with space after it, that's great. But if you've got and so I was thinking, well, then you can't. That one's a lot harder to cut cleanly. And a lot of this was that kind of thing. So that's how I did handle it. And the feedback I got so far is, well, that's how we're going to do it because he wants his show to stay clean, but he also wants his guests to be able to speak freely. So we'll find out if that changes once he decides he wants to do it differently. Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead.
Right. I think that really is it. Is like they do want the hosts do want their podcast to be clean, but they also want their guests to feel comfortable and speak freely.
Yeah.
But they don't consider what happens in posts. So,
And they're thinking, well, she can take care of it.
right.
And maybe
Right.
they trust me to take care of it, even though I don't realize.
Right. But that needs to be
It's just-
explicit.
yeah,
And that's
we
something
need to
that's
talk about
missing
this.
from my agreement that I need to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
cleaned
And
up.
that probably should be a discussion in the onboarding process with the client. Like, because these situations are so common, it happens like every other week or every week, that it really, I think it's something we don't consider as editors necessarily to put in our onboarding process with new clients. So there should be like a little box. Do you, in this situation, what would you like to happen? Would you like
Yeah.
a cut? Would you like a bleep? Would you like a sparkle sound?
Sparkles.
Ooh, fancy.
Would you like a bird tweet? A sentence enhancer? Right? What is the protocol? And it's up to the client to decide, but it's also up to us to tell the client what they need to decide on, because they don't know.
Yeah. And so, one of the things I have in my agreement is I don't do shows that are explicit. I don't do I don't want to say non-family friendly because that's not what I'm going for, but I don't work on shows that are kind of pushing the boundaries in that way. But because it's a white label show, it becomes a little bit tougher to do that. So that's still something that's missing from my onboarding. Do you realize that this would make it explicit? I think I jumped in front of you.
No, my badge was tapping the phone, so I was afraid there's going to be ticks. So I wanted
Okay.
Nice.
all that was.
Take that out.
For
in
the
post.
listeners that may not be familiar with the term white label,
That's fair. Yeah.
how would you describe that? What is white label?
Yeah. So this is Brian again. I forgot to introduce myself a bunch of times now. I do some work for production companies that have their own clients. So from the client's perspective, their production company is handling everything, and I'm the editor that does the work for them. But in terms of the business relationship, I don't work for them as an employee. I work for them as an editor who has other clients that I also work for. But in terms of their customer, I don't bill their customer. I don't answer to their customer. I answer to them.
Right.
So you're like a subcontractor
Yeah.
for the
Yeah, that's a good
for
way
the
to put it.
editing company. I was trying to think because I ran into this situation where I asked somebody for their white label rates and they didn't understand what I was
Oh, really?
saying.
Okay.
Yes, and it kind of caused a kerfuffle.
Ooh, a kerfuffle.
So
A
are white
kerfuffle.
label rates higher or lower?
My white label rates are lower because I'm not dealing with the client acquisition and the client relationship. My client is the production company that has multiple customers.
So client acquisition. I'm just throwing that out there
Yeah.
for if there's anybody who's like a new podcast listener. Client acquisition has a cost attached to it.
Yeah.
Like there is math to determine how much it costs you to go out and get a new client. So if you're not familiar, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Is there also a rule of thumb that we can use for people? So I'm thinking of like the new editor where they're thinking, what's it going to cost me to find a client? Is there like a percentage or a cost? I don't even know how to put that in
I
math to
know
that.
the lower the better, but like when you're a new editor, like you can't help it.
Right.
It's going to be more expensive, but you're probably also not doing the math. But when you're more established, then that cost comes into play because you've got to look at how much time it takes and what you're spending the money on to get it. Is it like what kind of marketing efforts you're doing? What's the so much like what's the conversion rate? What's
Right.
the price per customer? All that stuff.
I
is
don't want to
just-
tell you what my recent cost per acquisition is because
You've
it's
made
been-
a lot of big investments
I-
into your
Yeah.
business, Jennifer.
I have.
Well, and I think,
And not all of them have paid off, and that's how business goes.
Yeah, but I think a lot of your recent expenses have been more around the recording space and the
Oh, I had some really stupid marketing decisions.
Oh, really?
Too. Oh, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we should save that for another one. I don't.
We'll save that. We'll save that.
We're supposed to share from our scars, not our wounds.
Yeah, that's what we just learned. In pod.
Too soon.
We discuss our wounds on the off-air mastermind sessions.
Yeah, if we ever do a Patreon.
Yeah.
There we go.
But you'd have to sign a non-disclosure, right?
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, because I mean, we're not going to share client stories.
No.
publicly.
No.
And that's another thing. Don't
Yeah.
do that. If you're a podcast editor, no, don't do that. Don't share those like horror stories.
or at least don't name names.
No,
Yeah.
don't name names.
I'm-
Don't name names.
Yeah, I should
No.
get off that one.
There was so much that was in my session that I didn't get to put in there. But that's why I told
At the
everybody
podcast editor conference?
At the podcast editors conference, I did a session on branding, and
You didn't put up my website, so you didn't give any bad examples.
no, your website is fine. I mean, beautiful, but like I
My
think I
website's
just
the
I ended
best
up telling
and she
everybody to
didn't use it.
behave yourself on social media because everybody's watching you,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the biggest thing. So maybe we should talk about the podcast editors conference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be good. I'm also wondering though, because I'm thinking about our listeners. Maybe they have some experience with this kind of thing, and they could maybe weigh in some comments or something and share. Okay, what do you do when you run into the
Oh,
cussing?
yeah.
Like, what's your process? Do you send it back and say, "Do you want me to cut this one?" Like, how what does that look like for you? Because
Tweet me at KY Podcasting.
yes, and then you
Yes.
can tag the rest of us, and we can all see it.
Yeah, and if you have an onboarding process for that,
Yeah,
let's see
Please.
it. Like,
Yeah.
share your wisdom. My goodness.
yeah. So why don't you kick off or the thing about the conference then, or
So I think Daniel did a great job.
the
speaking,
mastermind.
Oh,
and this is his wheelhouse. So why don't you tell us what the podcast editors conference was all about?
so this was the first ever. And so, like, one of the problems I have something like filler words.
It's we're not going to judge you.
Yeah, and don't
Maybe
you
we should just leave them
remember
all in so
that-
people
yeah,
can see
they
the
were
editors
okay.
too.
Yeah.
Plus, then we don't have to
Not-
edit them.
Then we don't have to edit them, right? I mean, if it's anything excessive, then yes. But
We'll
So-
forgive you.
like if it's
Thank
a big with a huge long pause, then yeah. But we could start with like a meditation.
Oh, that would be a great theme.
That would be our theme song.
Oh,
Okay.
no.
We just
All right,
went.
we got that.
Yeah.
So I think Steve said it best that that PEC is about the business side of editing, because and I had the idea that there's plenty of resources out there on how to edit a podcast, and watch a ton of YouTube videos on how to do it, but there's really nothing for people who do it professionally. So PEC was a great chance for people who have businesses in podcasts and around podcast editing to get together and share their collective knowledge.
So, what was your favorite session, Daniel?
I think, not to be too biased, yours was probably the most impactful.
Yours being
Carrie's, yes.
Aw.
Carrie Caulfield Eric had a session on branding. And if you look at, my logo and my branding, like I love my branding.
I love your branding too, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. But whenever I had it made, I did what I liked, but I never considered my ideal client. So we need to, we being my wife, who is also part of the business, take a look at what our colors are, like what our branding is, like is that effective for our client? And do we need to like change it up to kind of focus in on our ideal client?
And Carrie, since you were the one who did that, how do we do that? How do we know?
or are we just going to be announcing a service that you should start offering for the rest of us to
Yeah,
pay for?
I'm like, I use
Monetize
pink
this
and
now,
blue
right?
and brown. Does
I mean,
pink
you're
and
good
blue
at it.
and
Well, thank
does
you.
that matter? And I mean, how do I know if pink and blue is working? People are coming to me, so
Well,
pink
then
and blue.
that's one. Are they your people or are they the clients you want to work with?
I don't even know. I'm still trying to figure out
still
who
trying
that
to
is.
figure-
So
Well, I
we can
think
have
so
a
the-
whole other talk about that.
Yeah, the first thing we need to have a talk about is like defining your ideal client because that really is helpful. When I make a post or do anything, I am thinking one very specific person. And I started by using I like took my favorite clients and I mashed them all together into one super person. So, but the color thing is hard, right? Because you're going to you as a business owner, you're going to have to look at that logo all the time. And you
Yes.
don't want to look at it and go, ugh. But chances are, if you just do a little research about your ideal client, like that's why you really need to know who they are, because then you can start to look at them, actually, like those people who fit that profile. You have to go and see what they're doing. What are they engaging with? What gets them to comment and respond on things? Like, look at what images are speaking to them and kind of go from there and kind of pull your colors. It doesn't have, don't necessarily copy, although, there are only so many colors in the world. So, but see what kind of visual content they're interacting with, and then start really thinking about the colors that you're using and the emotions that are coming up when you see those colors. Does that make sense? I feel like I could. Did I explain that clearly? Because I don't know that I explained that.
I mean, I think you did. I think one challenge is the ideal client.
Right. That is the first one.
But then the other is the idea of being able to get online, find that person, and figure out what, I don't want to say trigger in a bad way, but kind of triggers a reaction that you can go,
inspires
okay.
Them.
Right? Yeah, inspires. That's good because, one, it kind of feels creepy.
You have to be a stalker, though. It's not stalking.
You have to be a stalker.
It's market research.
Exactly.
And the other is market research is one of the very expensive and very time-consuming parts of client acquisition. And I'm thinking, for me, being selfish, right? The guy who is a side hustle editor. I work full-time and I edit on the side in all of my free time. Finding the time to do that when it doesn't generate now money, and having a show to edit that does generate now money, that's a tough balance, right?
You can do it over a long period of time, right? So you can do every weekend for a month. You're going to take an hour and just investigate those people, like do that market research.
So do you have like a system that you use or a place where you keep records? Because I forget what I did.
Yeah.
I just write it down in my notebook.
Okay.
I just pen and paper, literally. I have a notebook that I use for my business. It's really thick. It's cute. I use my Stitcher pen.
So is it your notebook of all the secrets?
It is my notebook of all the secrets.
We need to get our hands on that notebook.
Yeah.
No kidding.
I didn't bring it with me. I didn't. I left it at home.
I have like 5 different notebooks. That's my problem.
Yeah. But my notebook, so there's one section for all my to-dos. Like for every week, I write down week 1, what week it is, and then all the things I need to edit and the business tasks. And then there's a section for consult calls, like for potential clients I talk to. And then there's a section for the business stuff. And I use Post-it tabs to keep it all organized. And I'm in love with my notebook.
She's a genius.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
And then I don't need to be I can just jot something down when I think about it. I don't have to. And when you write it by hand, you tend to remember more. So
Ink it, not think it.
But also, if you're looking on Instagram, you can save other people's posts.
Okay.
There's a little bookmark flag.
Right. I saw that.
So you can use that as you're doing this research to save the things that your ideal client is engaging with.
So your colors, Brian, are green and yellow.
Yes.
And then Daniel, you're orange and brown.
It's red and gray.
Oh
But
man,
I think,
my computer
your
must need to be
clients are more
calibrated.
male.
Yeah.
So
Like an orange
those
is red.
colors actually, I don't think you would need to. I don't think you'd need to change them unless you're going after a very specific set of. I mean, I think your ideal clients are probably just going to respond to that. You aren't going after all the women.
No, although interestingly, the production company that I work for is a female business owner, and I'm not quite sure why she connected. I mean, we connected on Facebook first.
Because of how you are on Facebook. Because she got to know, like, and trust you.
Oh, right. Because we're only going to hear those words once this weekend, right? Yeah. But, and truthfully, those were not the colors I would have chosen. I had a guy do the logo design for me, and I don't know why he chose the colors. I think he just liked them, but they worked. And so I have sort of a brand sheet. What I don't have is a good font selection, because what I've discovered is that with the various tools that I work with, as well as what's available in my WordPress website, I can't find a common typeset that I like that works on all the platforms and all the tools.
That's free. Because you can buy a font and license it for commercial use, and then have it on all those things.
Interesting.
But in the
But it
squirrel
can get really
font,
expensive.
font squirrel?
I mean, I would say a good font starting at $50
Okay.
and moving on up from I mean, they can be thousands of dollars.
I'm not going to do that.
Wow.
Yeah, no. So,
I just
so
got some
I
from
I
Font
use
School.
my trick is to use fonts that are similar.
Okay.
And so, like the fonts on my slide, even though my slides were quote unquote branded, it's not actually the fonts like that are in my logo. Like I don't have those were because when you are working with fonts in an image, it's a different license than working with fonts as in written text. So I don't have
It's almost
a
like
license.
licensing music then.
Right. I don't have a license for those fonts any other way but than visually. Like
Okay.
I can't do type with it essentially because
Okay.
it's two different things. So I have to find fonts that are close. So
Wow.
yeah, but nobody notices.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Like
So Daniel asked and Carrie answered a lot of stuff about the session and then some follow-up. Carrie, what was your favorite part?
my favorite was the end, Craig Wieland.
Oh my
gosh.
On
goodness,
the
yes.
ethics and disfluencies.
Yep.
That is so
Totally my
like
favorite.
my jam. It was about what you should cut and what you shouldn't as an editor and why. Like what should you really cut all the filler words?
Right.
Or should you just leave some in, and how cutting things can change the meaning
Mhm.
of what somebody is saying. If you change the meaning of your client's content, is that ethical?
Right.
And I think no.
Right.
I think that our job is to enhance make that meaning come through and not take it away or change it.
Well, and at the risk of sounding a bit like a Luddite, I was unaware that there were published standards for TV journalism and that kind of stuff that we could draw from, right, to provide a
I
foundation.
wasn't aware
Picture of that
too.
slide.
I thought that we were just making this up. Like,
Yeah, so I'm not quite sure how to approach that without like taking a class on it, but that's something I'm thinking about is, okay, how do I do this in a way that has the level of integrity that we would expect for a different kind of publication without turning it into a radio like I don't want to edit radio. Sorry.
right.
Well, I came out of that session thinking either this is going to make my job really easy because I'm not going to worry about editing very much, or this is going to make my job really hard because I'm going to overthink every little edit. So hopefully it'll be a happy medium, and I will have been doing it properly all this time and just never thought about it.
And I suspect it gets easier with time, right? Just like cutting the ums after you try and cut an and so like several times in a row and you realize, okay, this one can't be split in the middle.
Mhm.
I can't like this one has to stay or it has to go out completely because there's no way to make this work. Okay, well then you start realizing those things too, I think.
Yeah. I went up to Craig after the session. I was like, we need to write a book on this for
Yeah.
podcast editors.
Yeah.
And he said very humbly, I'm not a linguist though. Like, you don't need to
dude.
be a
Well,
linguist.
he's not also an
like,
attorney. But
So, but I think because there's no guide for us as podcast editors about any of this stuff. What about the ethics and disfluencies and when should we cut what? I mean, we really are just making it up, like,
Yeah.
and figuring it out and hoping our clients like it.
Oh, my favorite
Yeah.
Was definitely the disfluencies and ethics,
okay.
hands down.
Did you
Now,
have a
I
thick-
was mentioned in Brittany Felix's, so I have to give props to her because my face showed up on her slides. But, I was helping with registration. So
Yeah, I didn't
hear
know.
hers
So
also.
how do you do? Because Brittany's was good too, but like I don't think that my Facebook page
Mhm.
has those little like pictures.
They're called featured photos.
That's her profile.
Yeah, her
Yeah.
Facebook profile. Yeah,
I think it's called featured photos, and you just have to pick your featured
Yeah,
photos.
it's in your edit
Okay.
your about section.
I
yeah.
did not know that.
Magic.
Yeah,
I'm
so-
doing it wrong.
I'm not going to talk about a favorite session, but I had like two favorite things that I took away. Because if I said favorite session, it would be the two we've already talked about.
Yeah, I know, right?
So favorite things I took away were the thing about the featured photos.
Mhm.
So I've already gone into Facebook to edit my featured photos because of Jennifer and Brittany, because it's all their fault.
Uh-huh.
And then the other thing was the stuff that we saw that's coming with Hindenburg, because I totally geeked out about that, but we can't talk about it yet because it's not public. But I'm really
but it's
looking
gonna
forward
be
to that.
good.
Oh,
Brian
I have
is a Hindenburg,
Hindenburg.
geek for
Yes.
reals. So
And he's like kind of sold me on it for content editing.
man.
So yeah, so I saw that and I was excited.
Yeah, so I got the beta features working this morning, and Oh my.
Really?
Yeah. So one of the shows that I
You should have seen that look. I mean, he really does
Yeah.
love Hindenburg.
so one of the shows that I edit is they record a lot in trade shows, and so it's 2 to 3 open mics in a conference room or a trade show environment where there's a lot of background noise, and so I spend a lot of time fading in and out of transitions between speakers while they're talking, so that it's a transparent fade, so the things that they're presenting are kind of like what Tom Kelly showed with the removing voice bleed using some automation in Pro Tools or Reaper or some tool like that. This will do some of that kind of stuff. And so I did a really quick test. And I can't say that it was perfect because I only listened to a little bit. But what I did was I was able to lower the noise floor on the non-active tracks by 20 decibels with the click of a button. And dude.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, because I have a
and it took like
client.
30 seconds to process, not like 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh. Well, because I have a client who does podcast interviews he's like a sponsored podcast.
Okay.
So same thing. He's
Yeah.
at trade shows essentially interviewing people, and it's the volume in the background is up and
Yeah.
down. It's crazy. All of a sudden the music comes on really loud.
Right.
It's just
And as a paid editor, time is money, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Especially when you bill because I don't bill by the hour, I bill by the episode.
Right.
And so if I can produce an episode faster that gives me the same quality or better, then I'm going to do it because they're getting what they're wanting, and I'm able to then turn around another show.
Right. And I just want to throw this out there. This podcast is not sponsored by Hindenburg,
No.
but very well could be if Hindenburg would like to get in touch with us.
But then Daniel couldn't never talk because he's Mr. Reaper.
Yeah.
Well, we could alternate.
Well,
Like, right?
No, but
I don't see
Reaper
Reaper.
has this function, right? Reaper can do this kind of thing already with the it's
like an automated.
It's automatic splits or something like that.
Yeah, kind of. It's not quite what Hindenburg
No.
is proposing.
No, there's definitely takes it to a different level.
Yeah.
But
Oh, like I'm working on some stuff with Reaper.
Oh, this podcast may also be brought to you by Reaper.
an open source program.
Oh,
However, like seeing these like promo videos like makes me want to dive into Hindenburg. Like they're that good.
If only they'd offered a 60-day free trial to all of the attendees of the
Oh,
Podcast
if
Editors
only.
Conference.
if only. That's like
I'd definitely-
I'd try it if they did it. I don't know where I'm going. Never mind.
Yeah.
Ignore me.
So those are the two things I took away. One, I'm geeking out, and two, I'm trying to change my Facebook profile to be more like Jennifer because
Yay.
she was our good example.
Yeah, I need to clean up my Facebook. I got too much personal things that probably shouldn't be out there.
Well, all of my featured photos have my brand in them. It's me doing a podcast thing or me wearing my brand colors or
very
me
good.
speaking.
About branding.
Thank
Mhm.
you.
You
Yeah.
really are. Like, I know what you do. I know who you are. I know who you serve. I don't even have to I never have to ask you. I mean, you're wearing Kentucky earrings. You're like a fucking brand, right?
Yeah.
With her t-shirt on and
I'm with Bourbon Barrel
Yeah.
Podcasting in
I mean,
Lexington.
I feel kind of bad now that the sparkle jacket is taken. Now I don't know what to do for a level of in-your-face brand.
Well,
I
the reason
almost-
I got pink as my color is because I decided, I was a bridesmaid and we had to wear these bright pink shoes for the wedding. So I had these bright pink shoes and was like, well, I'll just wear them to conferences and be the person in the bright pink shoes. These are different.
Oh,
I had to.
she had to get more. Right?
I had to get more. So then I had the pink as the color, and I'm from Kentucky, and my favorite color just happens to be UK blue. And so I wanted to pair that blue and pink, and
It looks
that
really
just
nice together.
happens.
And I think it's funny because I thought I was the only one who purchased their sneakers based on like their brand. I know you didn't originally.
No,
But
these I did. The ones I'm wearing
those you
today.
did.
Yeah, these
the
I did on
first pink
purpose.
pair you didn't.
No,
But
I
this
was stuck
one
with
was
those.
purposeful, and I thought it was funny that that somebody else was like, "Oh, this is part of my brand, so I'm
Yep,
going to wear
my
it."
shoes
Like
are.
that's why I have purple sneakers, which I'm not wearing today because
Okay.
Florida. I
No,
wanna
but
wear
your
sandals.
toes are purple.
my nail polish and toes are purple. So
Purple in a good way, not like, oh my gosh, your feet
yeah,
are
not like
falling
black.
off.
I mean, there's a very fine line with purple because it can look very cheap.
Oh.
It can go wrong really easily. So just a warning if you're using purple.
Okay. Well, we're at the 30-ish minute mark. Does anybody have anything else we need to hit before we sign off?
I want to thank Steve and Mark.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, totally. Steve Stewart and Mark Veal.
Yeah, for putting the podcast editors conference on. And I'd like to let everybody know that it's going to happen again.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
going to happen next year for sure. So, and if it doesn't, I have their addresses.
If it doesn't, we'll do our own.
We'll just all show up at Steve's house.
There we go.
Yeah.
And you can
Same.
request to join the Podcast Editors Club on Facebook, answer the questions, and maybe you'll get to join the group of 5,000?
Over 5,000.
Yeah, over 5,000.
A lot of people.
A lot of people.
But you got to
very
answer the
helpful.
questions and be for reals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry, you can't answer. You can't edit with Microsoft Word. We've discovered that one doesn't work. Yeah.
And
What do you
also-
use to edit? Microsoft
Yeah.
Word. Nuh-uh.
So should we maybe just go around the table, tell everybody where to find us, and then Jennifer, you can sign us off?
Perfect.
Is that so we can start with Carrie and just go this way?
Well, do we want to mention,
Or-
like, if you want to be on the show?
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Like, what are
Okay.
we going to do with this show, essentially? So, Brian, you take that because.
Yeah. So what we'd like to do is bring on other editors, maybe one or two at a time at the most, and maybe hear about what you're doing, what challenges you might be facing, and see if there's anything that we can do to help support you and get you some support from the community about the kinds of things that you're working on to raise visibility to some of the stuff that we've got going on. And then if there are resource people that we could bring on the show, for example, if we need help with legal or something, perhaps we could get an attorney on the show to talk about that kind of stuff. What we're looking for from editors is if you want to be on the show, we're going to ask you to let us know. We'll have to put a link in the episode notes for how to do that because that's not set up yet. But we want to know that you're interested in being on the show. If there's something in particular that you'd like to talk about, and then the requirement to be on a show is that you'll edit the previous one. So that'll give us the opportunity to talk about what you did for editing, what we can learn from you as an editor, and then also it helps lighten the workload so that we can put this out.
And I just want to say light editing.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need to cut out all the ums.
Yeah, we're not looking for detail. We just want it to sound like a good mix, like it was put together by people that knew what they were doing, but we're actually recording live.
or something actually put together a show.
Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah.
So we're not looking for like 3 hours of editing, but it will be multiple tracks, and you'll have to be able to do that and then put it out. And then what we'll do is we'll give you props when you come on the show and say, hey, for if you think about like the previous show, we'll say, hey, they edited the last show. If you'd like to hear the quality of what they do, go listen to that show. And our hope is that maybe that'll bring you some clients and some customers and help you raise your visibility without having to do a bunch of pro bono work out there for people that really don't know what they're asking for yet, right? We want you to have a good experience.
Right. And then you automatically have 4 references
Yeah.
and 1 podcast for your portfolio.
So, yeah. And I think, was that all the requirements? Yeah.
I think so.
And then I guess the other thing would be, we're intending for this to be a clean show. So when our guests come on, I think we would just be asking for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll tell them ahead of time, so there's no
Yeah,
question.
it's a professional show, right?
Will
If they say, "Can I
Will
cuss?"
Wheaton's
we'll say,
rules. So,
Yeah.
do you know what the Will
Oh.
Wheaton's rules? I'm not going to say it because it wouldn't be a clean show, but
I don't
everybody
know that.
Google that.
Okay, well,
Everybody
there's your
Google.
homework.
That's your homework. And also subscribe.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you are?
I'm Carrie Caulfield Eric from Yaya Podcasting, and you can find me at yayapodcasting.com.
And I'm Brian Ensminger. You can find me at toptieraudio.com.
I'm Daniel Abendroth, and you can find me at rothmedia.audio.
I'm Jennifer Longworth at bourbonbarrelpodcasting.com, and you've been listening to the Podcast Editors Mastermind Show. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Yeah.
Okay.